Hey guys, welcome to Belgian Hikers. We are doing a tent review today, or actually a double tent review of Decathlon's two lightest two-person hiking tents. And if you're thinking, what is Decathlon again? Well, it may not exactly be a household name in the United States, but it's actually the biggest sporting goods retailer in the world with over 2,000 stores. Now they have a reputation for low prices, but over the years I have bought quite a lot of their stuff at both hiking and non-hiking. And I must say overall I've been quite happy with the quality. So we are reviewing both the tunnel tent, that's this one, and the slightly bigger freestanding version. But before I get into the differences between the two tents, let me quickly point out a couple of things that they have in common. Number one, price. They are 200 euros each, which is obviously not dirt cheap, but still firmly on the cheaper end of ultralight hiking tents. Number two, they are both made from PU-coated polyester, while most competitors use nylon, and that means that you are getting the usual advantages of polyester. It won't be as stretchy and saggy as nylon, and importantly, it will also absorb less water, which is a big plus when you are packing a wet tent. But of course you're also getting the disadvantages. Polyester has a lower strength to weight ratio than nylon, so it will tear a little easier and it will generally be a bit heavier. Number three is that Decathlon sells very reasonably priced replacements for both the inner and the outer tents, so if something were to get damaged, you can easily replace it. And Decathlon guarantees replacement parts for all their products at small margins for 10 years after their production dates. That's a great service and one that is not that common on the lower end of the market. Okay, so what are the main differences between these two tents? Well, first there's the weight. The tunnel version is 1750 grams, which makes it 200 grams lighter than the freestanding version. And Decathlon calls these ultralight tents, but I don't really think the ultralight community online would agree. Now, these are great options if weight is less of an issue for you than price or comfort. But if you've got your mind set on the lightest possible tent, you should probably look elsewhere. As for the shape, the freestanding version is a bit shorter and significantly wider, which gives it an igloo-like shape, while a tunnel tent is longer and more narrow. The freestanding version also has two vestibules, while a tunnel tent has only one. So what does that mean in terms of living space? These are both sold as two-person tents, but unless you are very fond of the person you're hiking with, I would not consider the tunnel tent a viable option for two people, unless one of you is creatively shaped. And if you have to use it with two people, I would advise you to be this person. The freestanding tent is a little bit better in that regard, but it's still quite cramped. For one person though, they both offer plenty of space, with the tunnel tent being slightly better suited for tall people and the freestanding version offering more headroom. Okay, onto the specifics of each of these tents. Now I should first point out, just for the sake of clarity, that the version of this tent that we're showing here and the one that we've used most often is actually the older version of the tunnel tent, though they are quite similar. Now, because we don't own the newer version, we reached out to Decathlon and asked them what the main differences were, and they explained that the fabric of the outer tent has been replaced by a more expensive, more breathable fabric that does a better job at preventing condensation in cold and wet climates. It's also a bit lighter than its predecessor, and the color coding is improved. Now, color coding is something that Decathlon really excels at in its newer tents, by the way. If you are holding something that is yellow and you're wondering where it fits, well, it fits into some other yellow thing. And that may sound dumb, but it does wonders for your setup time the first few times that you set it up. You know, user interface matters even when you're in the great wide open. One of the main things that I like about the tunnel tent is that it's a very simple, very solid, easy to set up construction, at least once you wrap your head around the way that these little balls support the main arch. It's well ventilated, and with its low profile, it performs better in high wind situations, especially if you position its back towards the wind. This is a dual wall tent, but the inner is attached to the outer wall and you set them up simultaneously. Now that is great in rainy weather because it keeps you from having to set up the inner first, getting it wet in the process. However, the fact that you can't use both separately also means that you can't just take the inner tent with you when there's no rain, and you can't just take the outer tent with you when you're hiking outside of buck season. So it's a good setup, but it's not the most versatile. The freestanding tent has a double Y construction that's quite reminiscent of some bigger name tents like the Big Agnes Copper Spur and the MSR Hubba Hubba. So it's a time-tested design with a couple of clear advantages. Number one, it is a freestanding tent, so you can set it up even on rocky or very sandy ground, and you can move it around after you set it up. Number two, you can use both the inner and the outer separately. Now, using the outer tent on its own does require a ground sheet that you can purchase separately for 25 euros. It does add 270 grams, but it also adds protection to the floor of your tent, and it can save you weight by allowing you to leave the inner tent at home when conditions allow it. Without the ground sheet, setting it up in the rain is inevitably going to be a bit of a pain, but of course that's usually the case with freestanding tents. In conclusion, if you're in the market for one of these tents, which one should you buy? Well, it depends on what's most important to you. If you care most about weight and easy setup, or you plan to camp at windy spots with no cover, like the Isle of Skye in Scotland or up in the mountains above the tree line, then I personally go for the tunnel version. If your primary concern is comfort and versatility, and you mainly camp in forests like the Ardennes, Finland, Sweden, then go for the freestanding version and maybe add the ground sheet. All in all, I think for 200 euros, these are both great options and easy recommendations for anyone who doesn't mind the weight. That said, I would like to see Decathlon showing a little more ambition to really go after the ultralight part of the market, because it seems like the only companies that are taking ultralight seriously are smaller American companies that simply don't have the economies of scale that Decathlon has, and those tents can be absurdly expensive to import to Europe, sometimes more than $1,000 after taxes and import duties. Now, if you compare these 200 euro Decathlon tents to something like the Big Agnes Tigerwall Carbon, which is a fairly similar design but with higher end materials, you can see that both in terms of weight and price, there is a huge gap. So I'm betting there's a fairly large unserved audience here for a tent priced around, I don't know, 400, 500 euros that is significantly lighter than the tents that we've covered in this review. But enough with the daydreaming about gear. The important thing, of course, as always, is to just start planning your next hike and get out there. Thank you so much for watching. If you considered one of these tents and you opted for another brand, another model that you were happy with, tell us about it in the comments. I think that'll be helpful to anyone watching this. And if you have any questions regarding any of these tents, hit us up in the comments. If you enjoy reviews like these, do consider subscribing so we can see you in the next one.